The courtroom door swung open, and there she was, my wife Emily, laughing like she hadn't a care in the world, her arm looped through his. His name was Derek, the married man who'd turned my life into a waking nightmare. Their brazen confidence hit me like a punch to the gut, but I wasn't alone in my fury. His wife, Laura, stood beside me, her eyes blazing with the same betrayal. 7 years of marriage, countless shared dreams, and a home we'd built together. It all unraveled the moment I found those texts on Emily's phone 6 months ago. "Meet me tonight, babe," Derek had written, and my world shattered. I could still hear the smug tone in her voice when I confronted her. The way she shrugged and said, "You're boring, Tom. I deserve more." More, apparently, was Derek, a slick real estate agent with a wife and 2 kids of his own. Laura, his wife, had discovered their affair around the same time, catching them sneaking out of a hotel together. We'd both been blindsided, but neither of us was prepared for what came next. Emily filing for divorce, demanding half of everything I'd worked for, and Derek's audacity to do the same to Laura. Laura and I met by chance at a coffee shop, both of us raw and reeling from our spouse's betrayal. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her late 30s, with dark hair and a quiet strength that made me feel less alone. Over coffee, we shared our stories, our pain knitting us together in a way I hadn't expected. "They think they've won," Laura said that day, her voice steady but fierce. "But they don't know who they're messing with." That was the spark, the moment we decided we wouldn't let Emily and Derek walk away unscathed. The courtroom was our battleground now. Emily and Derek strode in, their laughter echoing off the polished wood walls, oblivious to the storm brewing. I glanced at Laura, her jaw set, her fingers clutching a folder of documents we'd spent months preparing. We'd uncovered everything. Their secret bank accounts, the lavish trips they'd taken on our dime, even the lies they'd told to cover their tracks. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair pulled back tightly, watched them with a raised eyebrow, her gavel resting like a loaded weapon. Emily's lawyer, a wiry man with a cheap suit, stood first. "Your Honor, my client seeks a fair division of assets and alimony, given the length of the marriage." Fair. The word burned in my throat. Fair was the life I'd given her. Paying off her student loans, supporting her dreams of starting a boutique, only for her to throw it all away for Derek's empty promises. Laura leaned closer, whispering, "Stay calm, Tom. We've got this." Her confidence anchored me, but my heart still raced as I watched Emily smirk, whispering something to Derek that made him chuckle. I thought back to the nights I'd spent sleepless, replaying every moment of our marriage, wondering where I'd gone wrong. Was it the long hours I worked as a contractor to provide for us? The way I'd trusted her completely, never questioning her late nights out with friends? The pain was sharp, but it had forged something new in me, a resolve I didn't know I had. Laura, too, had changed. She'd been a stay-at-home mom, devoted to her kids, but now she was a force, digging through financial records and hiring a private investigator with me to expose the truth. The first piece of evidence came out when Laura's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we have proof of financial misconduct by both Mrs. Emily Carter and Mr. Derek Larson." The room went silent. Emily's smirk faltered as the lawyer presented bank statements showing thousands of dollars funneled into an offshore account. Money siphoned from my business and Laura's savings. Derek shifted uncomfortably, his charm cracking under the judge's piercing gaze. Laura squeezed my hand under the table, a silent promise that we were in this together. We weren't just fighting for money or pride. We were fighting for justice, for the lives they tried to steal from us. As the lawyer continued, detailing how Emily and Derek had planned to start a new life abroad, leaving us to pick up the pieces, I felt a flicker of hope. They thought they could laugh their way through this, but we were about to turn the tables. The judge called a recess, and Laura and I stepped outside, the weight of the moment pressing down on us. "They didn't see this coming," Laura said, her voice low but triumphant. I nodded, my mind racing with what was still to come. We had more evidence, screenshots, recordings, even a witness who'd seen them plotting at a bar. Emily and Derek thought they'd outsmarted us, but they were wrong. This was only the beginning. Back in the courtroom, the air felt heavier, charged with the anticipation of what we were about to unleash. Emily and Derek sat across from us, their earlier laughter replaced by uneasy glances. They could sense something was coming, but they had no idea how deep we dug. Our lawyer, Ms. Hargrove, a woman with a reputation for dismantling liars, took the floor again. She held up a flash drive, its contents a ticking time bomb. Your Honor, we have recorded conversations between Mrs. Carter and Mr. Larson that reveal their intent to defraud both Mr. Thomas Carter and Mrs. Laura Larson. Emily's eyes widened, and Derek's face went pale. I caught Laura's gaze, her lips twitching into the faintest smile. We'd spent weeks tracking down every piece of evidence, from late-night phone calls to a bartender who'd overheard their schemes. Ms. Hargrove played the first recording. Emily's voice, syrupy and smug, filled the room. Once we get the money, we're gone, Derek. They'll never find us in Bali. Derek's low chuckle followed, and I felt my stomach twist. Bali. They'd planned to run off with our savings, leaving Laura's kids and me to fend for ourselves. The judge's face remained impassive, but her eyes narrowed as she scribbled notes. The next piece of evidence was a series of emails, forwarded to us by the private investigator we'd hired. They detailed how Emily and Derek had manipulated their finances, funneling money through fake business expenses. Emily had used my company's accounts to fund their affair, hotel stays, designer clothes, even a deposit on a beachfront villa. Laura's discovery was just as damning. Derek had forged her signature to withdraw funds from their joint savings, claiming it was for business investments. Your Honor, Ms. Hargrove continued, this is not merely infidelity but a calculated effort to impoverish their spouses. Emily's lawyer objected, stammering about relevance, but the judge silenced him with a sharp look. I'll allow it, she said, her voice like steel. Derek whispered furiously to his lawyer, but Emily just stared straight ahead, her knuckles white as she gripped the table. I thought back to the moment Laura and I had decided to fight back. It was after a long night at her kitchen table, surrounded by bank statements and coffee cups. Her kids were asleep upstairs, and she'd looked at me with tears in her eyes. I can't let him take everything from them, she'd said. That was when we hired the investigator, a grizzled man named Ray who'd seen it all. He'd tracked their every move, from shady wire transfers to late-night meetings at a dive bar downtown. His findings were our ammunition, and now we were firing every shot. The courtroom drama escalated when Ms. Hargrove called our first witness, a co-worker of Derek's who'd overheard him bragging about screwing over Laura and me. The man, nervous but resolute, recounted Derek's boasts about how easy it was to manipulate us. He said Tom was too busy working to notice, and Laura was too focused on her kids, the witness said. I felt a pang of shame, but Laura's steady hand on my arm reminded me we weren't the fools here. As the day wore on, Emily's composure began to crack. She snapped at her lawyer, her voice sharp with panic. Derek, meanwhile, tried to maintain his charm, flashing smiles at the judge that fell flat. I could see the realization dawning on them. Their plan was unraveling. Laura leaned over, her voice a whisper. They thought we'd just roll over, she said. They underestimated us. By the time the session ended, the judge had ordered a forensic accountant to review the financial evidence. Emily and Derek left the courtroom in silence, their earlier bravado gone. Laura and I stayed behind, gathering our papers, our hearts pounding with a mix of exhaustion and triumph. This isn't over, Laura said, her eyes fierce. But we're winning. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the courthouse steps. I thought about the life I'd lost, the quiet mornings with Emily, the plans we'd made for a family. But standing there with Laura, I realized something new was taking shape. We weren't just fighting for revenge. We were fighting for our dignity, our futures, and the chance to rebuild. The next court date couldn't come soon enough. The second court date arrived like a storm rolling in, dark and inevitable. Laura and I sat side by side, our nerves taut but our resolve unshaken. Across the aisle, Emily and Derek tried to reclaim their confidence, but their smiles were forced, their whispers tense. Ms. Hargrove wasted no time. She presented the forensic accountant's report, a thick stack of papers that laid bare every cent Emily and Derek had siphoned off. Your Honor, the defendants diverted over $200,000 from their spouses' accounts, she said, her voice ringing with authority. The courtroom gasped, and I felt Laura's hand tighten on mine. That money was my life's work, Laura's security for her kids. Seeing it quantified made my blood boil. Emily's lawyer tried to spin it, claiming the funds were jointly managed and legitimate expenses. But Ms. Hargrove was ready. She produced receipts, luxury hotel bills, plane tickets to Paris, even a $10,000 watch Derek had bought for Emily. These are not the actions of a faithful spouse, she said, her words cutting through the room. The judge's expression darkened, and I saw Emily shift uncomfortably, her red dress suddenly looking garish under the fluorescent lights. Then came the bombshell, a video from the private investigator. It showed Emily and Derek at a bar, laughing as they toasted to new beginnings. Emily's voice was clear. Tom's too weak to fight back, and Laura's just a housewife. We've got this in the bag. The cruelty in her tone hit me like a slap, but it was Laura's sharp intake of breath that hurt more. She wasn't just a housewife. She was a mother, a fighter, a woman who'd turned her pain into power. The judge paused the proceedings to review the video in private, and the tension in the room was suffocating. Laura and I stepped into the hallway, our breaths uneven. They called us weak, I said, my voice low with anger. Laura nodded, her eyes glinting with defiance. Let them think that, she said. It's their mistake. Back inside, Ms. Hargrove called another witness, a bank manager who'd flagged suspicious transactions in Derek's accounts. He testified that Derek had tried to bribe him to keep quiet, offering a consulting fee to overlook the transfers. The judge's pen stopped moving, her gaze locking onto Derek, who shrank in his seat. Emily's face was a mask of panic now, her earlier laughter a distant memory. I thought about the nights Laura and I had spent poring over evidence, our shared determination keeping us going. We'd become more than allies. We were partners in this fight, bound by a common wound. Laura had told me about her kids, how she'd explained their father's absence without breaking their hearts. I admired her strength, her ability to protect them while facing her own pain. It made me want to fight harder, not just for myself but for her and her children. The day ended with the judge ordering a freeze on Emily and Derek's accounts, pending further investigation. As we left the courtroom, Laura turned to me, her voice steady. They're scared now, she said. Good. I nodded, feeling a spark of hope amidst the anger. We were stripping away their lies, piece by piece, and the truth was a weapon they couldn't counter. Outside, the air was crisp, the city bustling around us. I thought about the future, something I hadn't dared to imagine in months. Laura's kids were waiting for her at home, and I had a business to rebuild. But for the first time, I felt like we could do it. Emily and Derek had underestimated us, but they were about to learn what we were capable of. The next hearing was a week away, and we were ready to bring the fight to them. The third court date loomed, and the tension was palpable. Laura and I had spent the week preparing, our evenings filled with strategy sessions and quiet moments of shared resolve. We knew Emily and Derek were scrambling, their lawyers throwing up desperate defenses to counter our evidence. In the courtroom, Ms. Hargrove took the lead again, her presence commanding. She introduced a new witness, a former friend of Emily's named Sarah, who'd turned against her after learning the truth. Sarah's testimony was devastating. Emily bragged about how she'd played Tom, Sarah said, her voice trembling with disgust. She said she'd get half his business and start over with Derek. No strings attached. The courtroom buzzed, and I saw Emily's face flush red, her eyes darting to Derek for support. He offered none, his own fear evident. Sarah went on, detailing how Emily had mocked my trust, calling me pathetic for believing her lies. Each word was a knife, but it also fueled my determination. Laura's testimony followed, and she spoke with a quiet power that silenced the room. Derek promised our kids a stable future, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Instead, he stole their security for his own greed. The judge leaned forward, her expression softening for the first time, and I knew Laura's words had hit home. Ms. Hargrove then presented text messages between Emily and Derek, obtained legally through our investigator. They were damning: plans to sell my business assets under the table, discussions about hiding money in offshore accounts. The judge's patience was wearing thin, and she interrupted Emily's lawyer mid-objection. "I've heard enough excuses," she said sharply. "This court will not tolerate fraud." Emily broke down then, tears streaming down her face, but they felt hollow to me. I remembered the nights she'd come home late, claiming work, while smelling of Derek's cologne. I'd believed her because I loved her, but that love was gone now, replaced by a steely resolve. Laura, too, had changed. She was no longer the grieving wife. She was a warrior, her eyes fierce as she watched Derek squirm. The day's session ended with the judge ordering a deeper investigation into the offshore accounts. Emily and Derek were barred from leaving the country, their passports temporarily seized. As they left the courtroom, Derek tried to grab Emily's hand, but she pulled away, her face a mix of anger and fear. Laura and I exchanged a look. Victory was close, but we weren't done yet. That night, Laura invited me to her house for dinner with her kids. It was the first time I'd met them, and their laughter filled a void I hadn't realized was there. Her son, Max, asked me about my work, and her daughter, Lily, showed me her drawings. For a moment, I felt like part of a family again, even if it wasn't mine. Laura smiled at me across the table, and I saw the same hope in her eyes that I felt in my heart. As I drove home, I thought about the journey we'd been on. Laura and I had started as strangers, bound only by our pain, but now we were something more. Friends, allies, maybe even the start of something new. The next court date would bring more revelations, and we were ready. Emily and Derek had built their future on lies, but we were tearing it down, brick by brick. The fourth court date was a turning point. Laura and I walked in with our heads high, knowing we held the upper hand. Emily and Derek, once so smug, now looked haggard, their lawyers scrambling to salvage their crumbling case. Ms. Hargrove presented the final piece of our evidence, a signed affidavit from Derek's business partner, who'd caught him falsifying records to hide profits. The document confirmed that Derek had used my business's resources to fund their affair, channeling money through fake contracts. The judge's expression was grim as she reviewed the affidavit, her pen tapping rhythmically against her desk. Emily's lawyer tried to deflect, arguing that she was unaware of Derek's actions. But Ms. Hargrove was relentless. She produced a paper trail linking Emily directly to the transactions, emails where she'd approved the fake invoices, knowing they'd drain my accounts. "Mrs. Carter was not a bystander," Ms. Hargrove said. "She was an active participant in this scheme." Emily's tears returned, but they did nothing to sway the room. The judge's silence was deafening. Laura took the stand again, this time to speak about the emotional toll. "My children ask me why their father doesn't come home," she said, her voice steady but laced with pain. "I have to look them in the eyes and lie to protect them from his betrayal." I watched Derek, expecting some sign of guilt, but he just stared at the floor, his jaw tight. Laura's words weren't just for the judge. They were for him, a reminder of the family he'd abandoned. My turn came next. I spoke about the years I'd poured into my business, the sacrifices I'd made to give Emily a life she claimed to want. "I trusted her," I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay composed. "And she used that trust to destroy me." The courtroom was silent, the weight of my words settling over everyone. Even Emily looked away, unable to meet my gaze. The judge called for a break, and Laura and I stepped outside, the cool air a relief after the stifling courtroom. "You did good in there," she said, her hand brushing mine. I nodded, grateful for her support. We'd become each other's anchor, pulling one another through the darkest moments. I thought about her kids, how they'd hugged me goodbye after dinner the other night. It was a small thing, but it reminded me there was still good in the world. Back inside, the judge delivered her preliminary ruling. "Based on the evidence, I'm inclined to deny Mrs. Carter's alimony request and Mr. Larson's claim to spousal support," she said. Emily gasped, and Derek's lawyer shot to his feet, but the judge raised a hand. "Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges." The room erupted in murmurs, and I felt Laura's hand grip mine, her breath catching. Emily and Derek left the courtroom in a daze, their lawyers trailing behind. Laura and I stayed, our hearts pounding with a mix of relief and disbelief. We'd done it. We'd exposed their lies and turned their greed against them. But the fight wasn't over. The judge had scheduled a final hearing to determine the division of assets, and we knew Emily and Derek wouldn't go down without a fight. As we walked out into the evening light, Laura turned to me. "We're almost there, Tom," she said, her voice soft but certain. I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I could see a future beyond the pain. A future where Laura and I might rebuild, together. The final hearing was days away, and the anticipation was electric. Laura and I spent every spare moment preparing, knowing this was our chance to seal Emily and Derek's fate. We'd uncovered one last piece of evidence. A hidden lease agreement for the Bali villa, signed by both of them. It was the final nail in their coffin, proof they'd planned to flee with our money. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged with finality. Emily and Derek sat apart now, their alliance fraying under the pressure. Emily's eyes were red-rimmed, her confidence gone, while Derek's charm had morphed into a desperate edge. Ms. Hargrove presented the lease agreement, her voice steady as she outlined how they'd used our funds to secure their escape. "This was not a mistake," she said. "This was a deliberate plan to defraud their spouses." The judge's expression was unreadable, but her questions were sharp. "Mrs. Carter, did you believe this villa was a legitimate investment?" she asked. Emily stammered, her lies unraveling as she tried to claim ignorance. Derek's lawyer attempted to shift blame, but the judge cut him off. "I've seen enough," she said, her voice final. Laura and I testified one last time, speaking not just of the financial loss but of the emotional devastation. I talked about the nights I'd spent questioning my worth, the betrayal that had shattered my trust. Laura spoke of her children, how she'd fought to protect their future. "We're not just asking for justice," she said, her voice clear. "We're asking for a chance to heal." The judge took a long moment before speaking. "This court finds that Mrs. Carter and Mr. Larson engaged in willful financial misconduct," she said. "Their claims to alimony and spousal support are denied. Furthermore, Mr. Carter and Mrs. Larson are awarded full control of their respective assets, with restitution to be determined." The gavel fell and the room seemed to exhale. Emily sobbed openly now, her face buried in her hands. Derek stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, as their lawyers whispered furiously. Laura and I turned to each other, our eyes meeting in a moment of shared triumph. We'd done it, not just for ourselves, but for everyone they'd tried to hurt. As we left the courtroom, the weight of months lifted. The sun was bright, the air warm with the promise of spring. Laura's kids were waiting for her, and I had a business to rebuild, but for the first time I felt free. We walked down the courthouse steps, our hands brushing, a silent acknowledgement of the bond we'd forged. That night, Laura invited me over again. Her kids ran to greet me, their laughter a balm to my soul. Over dinner, we talked about the future, new dreams, new possibilities. I realized I wasn't just healing. I was starting to hope again. Laura's smile, warm and genuine, told me she felt it too. The aftermath of the trial was quieter than I'd expected, but the victory was no less sweet. Laura and I had won more than just the case. We'd reclaimed our lives. Emily and Derek faced criminal charges for fraud, their dreams of Bali crumbling under the weight of their own greed. I didn't relish their downfall, but I felt a deep satisfaction knowing justice had been served. Laura's kids became a regular part of my life. Max asked me to help him build a model rocket, and Lily shyly showed me her latest drawings. Their trust meant more than I could say, and Laura's gratitude warmed me in ways I hadn't felt in years. We weren't rushing into anything, but there was an unspoken understanding between us, a possibility of something more when the time was right. My business began to recover, slowly but steadily. The money Emily had stolen was being traced, and the courts had ordered restitution. It wasn't just about the dollars. It was about rebuilding what she tried to take from me. Every contract I signed, every project I completed, felt like a step toward a new beginning. Laura, too, was moving forward. She'd enrolled in a business course, determined to start her own consulting firm. "I'm done being just a mom," she said one evening, her eyes bright with ambition. "I want to show my kids what's possible." I admired her more than ever, her strength a reminder of what we'd both overcome. The scars of Emily's betrayal lingered, but they were fading. I no longer woke up replaying her laughter in that courtroom, her arm linked with Derek's. Instead, I thought of Laura's steady presence, the way she'd stood by me through every battle. We'd turned our pain into power, our betrayal into a bond that neither Emily nor Derek could break. One evening, as we sat on Laura's porch, watching the sunset, she turned to me. "We did it, Tom," she said softly. "We took our lives back." I nodded, my heart full. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was ours to walk, together if we chose. The story of Emily and Derek's betrayal was behind us, a painful chapter closed. What lay ahead was a blank page, one Laura and I would write together, with courage, hope, and the kind of trust that only comes from surviving the worst. Their laughter had faded, but our strength was just beginning to shine.